Next we have a special guest speaker. This year we have the good fortune of having an MC, a guest MC, who will announce the awards. And many of you probably know him. If you have Cablevision or Optimum, you'll recognize our guest announcer as the local weatherman. Oh, closer, sorry. A little nervous. I wasn't expecting to speak. All right, so back again, if you do watch Cable Vision or Optimum, we have the local weatherman from our News 12 Westchester channel. So Joe Rowley is a 5-time Emmy-nominated meteorologist who holds the broadcast seal of approval from both the National Weather Association and the American Meteorological Society. He has also co-led several solar eclipse expeditions and served on board meteorologist for 3 eclipse cruises. He's also an associate and guest lecturer of the New York Hayden Planetarium, a contributing editor of the Sky and Telescope magazine, and he also writes for Space.com, Natural History magazine, and the Farmer's Almanac. So if we can all give a special round of applause.
It is wonderful to be here. I got to tell you something. When I was asked to be here, it to me was kind of like a piece of nostalgia because, and I know all of you who participated in the fair today, I know exactly how you feel. I know exactly what's going through your minds right now, the hopes and the expectations, and of course, the little bit of relief that it's all over with. The competition is over. I know you must have been drumming up the last couple of days on how you're going to make your presentations. And of course, the days and weeks leading up to this day, getting your wood or pegboard or whatever, looking at how you're going to design and how to put your various graphics up on that board. I know exactly what you're going through, what you have been going through, because many years ago, over 40 years ago, some of you may remember, some of the older folks in here may remember, the New York Daily News, still in business as of this time, but a bit different than it was back then. Back then, the Daily News sponsored a number of different things during the course of the year. The Harvest Moon Ball, which was always held in the fall. The Golden Gloves, the boxing tournament that peaked at Madison Square Garden, right about this time of the year in the spring. And also, they sponsored a citywide science fair. The citywide science fair, which was worked out with not only the Daily News, but also with the Science Association of New York, the American Institute of New York. They put on this big borough-wide science fair. All the boroughs got involved, and you're looking at somebody who grew up in the Bronx, in the Throgs Neck section of the Bronx. And so when I was about that big, I was involved in, I think, 3 or 4 science fairs that were sponsored by the Daily News. And in 2 of those fairs, I managed to become a borough finalist. And in fact, in 1 year, I won first prize for the borough of the Bronx. And that was really a big deal for me. Now, I tell you this only because, again, it was a citywide type affair. Now, this is a tri-county. This is a 3-county competition. But I do want to tell you that to all of you, whether you win something today, and of course all of you are winners for just being here. And I got to tell you something, when I go home tonight, I'm going to have to take a couple of aspirin because half of those titles of these science projects almost gave me a headache. Just trying to read the titles of the projects is an amazing feat enough. But I want to tell all of you that this fair is likely to help you move forward for you, could very well lead you to other things, other doors, other openings. Let me mention in my case how that happened. As I mentioned, I forget the year, it was either 1970 or 71, 72, I was first place in the Bronx. The borough finals of the fair, the fair was in the individual competition. In the Bronx, it was held at some high school. I don't remember what high school it was, but those who ended up winning went on to the borough finals, and that was held at the New York Hall of Science. Now, just this past week, we had the 50th anniversary of the opening of the New York World's Fair of 1964-65. Some of you older folks may remember that fair. I certainly remember it. And there were a number of exhibits, a number of things that were put up that still remain to this day. The symbol of the New York World's Fair of 64-65 is the big Unisphere. How many of you have seen that? That big stainless steel model, 12 stories high, of the globe, the world that we live on. And there are other things, too, that to this day still stand there. And one of them is the New York Hall of Science. How many of you have been to the Hall of Science in Flushing? Okay, so some of you have been. So back into the 1970s, the early 70s, that is where the borough finals for the science fair was held, at the Hall of Science. And my particular project was there. And after I had won, they had said, all of the winners of this year's fair, we want your projects, we're going to put them in a glass-enclosed showcase, and they're going to remain here at the New York Hall of Science, where visitors to the Hall of Science can see your project. Well, that was great. So after the fair was over, my project went into this case along with many others. As it turned out, back then, the Hall of Science had a planetarium. Now, some of you, I'm sure, have been to a planetarium. We have one in Yonkers at the Hudson River Museum. We have, of course, the big planetarium in New York City, the Hayden Planetarium. Well, they had a small planetarium at the Hall of Science. And the guy who ran the Hall of Science planetarium, looking at the projects, saw my project. Now, what was my project? I was very heavily into astronomy. I'm still into astronomy very heavily. And my project was about an eclipse of the sun, a total eclipse of the sun. I must tell all of you, both kids and parents, that before you depart this earth, before you die, you must, this is not a suggestion, this is almost like an order, you must see a total eclipse of the sun. For all of the beautiful and wonderful things in science and in nature that there are on this earth, probably the grandest and most spectacular spectacle you will ever see in your lifetime is a total eclipse of the sun. When the moon comes completely in front of the sun, blacks out the sun, darkness falls in the middle of the day, the stars come out, the great and amazing solar corona, the great crown that enshrouds the sun, which is only visible during a total eclipse, appears. Even astronomers, the stodgy scientists, speak of it with awe. And this is what you get to see for just a few precious minutes when the moon is positioned directly in front of the sun. And in 3 years, mark this down in your mental calendar. Mark this date down. August 21st, 2017, there's going to be the first total eclipse of the sun. We just had a total eclipse last week of the moon. They're nice. Yeah, they're cute. Total eclipses of the sun. You have to see it. And on August 21st, 2017, the very first total eclipse of the sun will cross the United States for the first time since the late 1970s, almost 40 years. And you must make note to try to get into the path where the eclipse is going to be. It's going to stretch from Oregon in the western United States, across the nation's midsection, and then go down and out over the Carolinas, South Carolina, and then out to sea. Very narrow path. You have to be within a path 80 miles wide. It's 2,000 miles long, but 80 miles wide. So you have to get mom and dad. Well, by that time, 3 years from now, some of you will be old enough to drive. But you get somebody to take you or fly into the eclipse path or drive the eclipse path. Anyway, in 1970, there was an eclipse that went right up along the eastern seaboard. Right up along the eastern seaboard. And my science project was about that. And I took pictures of that eclipse. It wasn't total in New York. I was so stupid back then. I should have gone to see the total. I stayed in New York. I saw like 97% of the sun blocked out. It was interesting, but it was not a total. But still, I took pictures. I worked up a science board and entered the science fair. Anyway, that was my project, the total eclipse of the sun. And now it's sitting in this glass showcase at the Hall of Science in Flushing. And the director of the planetarium saw that, found out who did it, called me up and said, hey, would you like to be an intern here at the Hall of Science at the planetarium? Would you like to help me? And at that time, I was about 16 years old. I said, sure, why not? So every weekend, I would go to the Hall of Science, and I would do the shows in the planetarium. That was no big deal. That was a big deal to do a show at the planetarium. You know how we did a show? We had these big plastic computer cards. Very antiquated, very ancient looking. I mean, compared to what we have today. But this was a big deal back in the 70s. And you'd stick this card into the machine, and then the narration would come on an 8-track cassette tape deck. And you get, and you know, for 15 minutes you hear the guy talking about, hello, this is the Hall of Science Planetarium. We welcome you. Look to the door and you can see the Big Dipper. 7 stars out. It was boring as all heck. Put me to sleep. But then one day, guess what happened? We had a major malfunction. Either the tape broke or the card didn't play or whatever. And now the director of the planetarium told me, he said, you know what you got to do now? I said, no, what? You got to do the show all by yourself, live. You. Can you do it? I heard that tape hundreds and hundreds of times already. And so the first couple of times I did exactly what the guy in the tape did. Hello, this is the Hall of Science. But then after a while, I got really bored, and I started improvising. And I started doing the show the way, I threw in a few funny jokes, interacted with the audience or whatever. That was the greatest learning experience for me because I learned how to talk in front of a big audience, just like we have here. I learned how to quickly answer questions from people. I learned a lot of the ins and outs of being able to interact with people, as well as being able to work on my ability of elocution, so to speak. In other words, being able to, talk the way, somebody on the radio would talk or on TV, whatever. And all this happened as a result of the science fair. I never would have gotten that chance if the director hadn't seen my science project and had invited me to the Hall of Science. Several years later, I'm graduating from college, I'm looking for a job. I go for an interview at a private weather company, which was also in Flushing, believe it or not. I seem to have this thing for Flushing, right? I'm also a Met fan. No. That's here for the Mets, right? All right. So I'm going to this weather company in Flushing for a job. What's the job? It's going to be doing weather forecasts on radio stations in the eastern United States. And the guy asks for my resume, where I went to school and everything. And then he hands me a script. And he says, would you read this as if you were doing the weather on radio? Just read it for me. Let me hear how you sound. So I went, well, good afternoon, everybody. High pressure is moving in from the Midwestern states. Low pressure is moving out toward the Maritimes of Canada. We're going to have a mostly sunny day today with a high temperature. The guy just he said, hold on for a second. And he ran into the other room, brought his partner out, the other guy who owned the weather company. And he said, read that again. And I said, I read it again. And like that, I was hired right on the spot to do weather on radio. And I did that for 17 years. And then when I found out that they were going to do a news network in Westchester, News 12 Westchester, News 12 Hudson Valley back in 1995. I put in for a chance at the job of doing the weather on News 12, and I got that job. And here I am all these years later. I've been in the business of weather now for 36 years, and where do I trace it all back to? I trace it all back to those science fairs that I entered back in the early 70s. So you see, you never know. what this may all lead to. Some of you in this room right now, you may end up doing career or research work in a certain field of science. Some of you may go on to do something else, but whatever, this is an important step in your lives. And this is what you can do. You can take that and build on it, as I did all of those years ago. And here I am today talking to all of you, which is why now I say I understand where some of you are doing, what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, when's he going to shut up so I can hear who won today? Right? And I'd love to be able to start announcing winners, but they're still doing the competition. Aha! Hang on for a second here. We're breaking for a commercial insert. Hold on.